Hello everyone. You are on the channel Detective Archive. Today the story about the tragic fate of David Reimer, a boy who was forced to become a girl. Before the story begins, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Enjoy watching everyone. Is it possible to change a child's gender through education and surgery alone? Dr. John Money tried to answer this question, but his experiment became one of the most terrifying and tragic cases in the history of psychology. This story is about how an attempt to prove a controversial theory led to immeasurable suffering and destroyed the life of an entire family. David Reimer, born Bruce, became the victim of a scientific experiment that called into question the entire concept of gender neutrality. Canadian Janet Reimer dreamed of having children. Her wish was destined to come true. On August 22, 1965, she became the mother of identical twins Bruce and Brian. The boys were born healthy and developed within normal limits until they were 7 months old. Then the brothers were diagnosed with phimosis, a defect of the foreskin of the penis that interferes with urination. The Reimers were advised to solve the problems by circumcision. The procedure is standard and not the most complicated, so no one could have predicted that something would go wrong. The doctor used an electric cauterizing machine instead of a regular scalpel during the operation. But the instrument didn't work well, and one of the boys, Bruce, ended up with his penis mutilated. Brian was never operated on, and after a while his phimosis cleared up without treatment. The Reimers didn't know what to do. In the 1960s, it was impossible to perform penile reconstruction surgery on an infant. Bruce's parents felt that he was now doomed to be an unhappy, crippled man. But then Janet saw a discussion on television about sex change operations, in which sexologist John Money participated. At the time, he was considered a leading researcher in gender, he coined the term, and childhood sexuality. Janet decided to turn to Money for help. In 1965, John Money, a professor of medicine, founded the Gender Identity Clinic. He was interested in issues of sexual behavior, orientation, and gender. He also worked on cases of intersex children, who had characteristics of both male and female genders. Money believed that gender identity is a social construct that is formed in the human psyche as a result of upbringing. The scientist assumed that children remain gender neutral until about 2 years of age. He called the period from 0 to 2 years gender gates. At this time, Money believed parents can influence their child's gender identity, even if there are no questions about his biological sex. A letter from Janet Reimer, the mother of identical twins who were originally male, gave Money a chance to test his assumptions. Bruce Reimer's case could be a clear proof that gender is not an innate human trait. Moreover, the purity of Money's experiment could be ensured by a control group, that is, the second brother, Brian. When Money examined the baby, he came to a disappointing conclusion. The only way to raise Bruce as a person who could have heterosexual contacts was to raise him as a woman. And to do this, it was necessary to literally make him a woman. The doctor offered his help in surgically correcting the child's gender. Bruce's parents agreed. Then Bruce Reimer ceased to exist, he became Brenda Reimer. In 1967, shortly before his 2nd birthday, he underwent castration. Another operation to form a vagina was ahead. John Money warned the Reimers that they were not to tell Brenda or her twin brother Brian about the surgeries. The Reimers were also required to visit the doctor regularly to get prescriptions for hormone therapy, which was prescribed to Brenda. This was necessary to make her body look like a woman's body. The twins hated going to see Dr. Money. He insisted that in order for Brenda to fully understand the differences between a man and a woman, she needed to be clearly shown these differences. So the doctor often talked to his patient about genitalia, and took naked photos of her and her brother. Later, the twins accused Money of forcing them to pose together in various sexualized positions. According to the doctor himself, this was just rehearsal sex play. Money and his students believed that everything that was happening would be good for Brenda. She just needed to believe in her femininity. The doctor entered the twins' data into the John/Joan file, an anonymized account of the experiment, fragments of which Money began publishing when Brenda was 5 years old. In 1972, Money published a book, Man and Woman, boy and girl, and 3 years later, in 1975, he published Sexual Labels, What It Means to Be a Man or a Woman, in which he described the forced transition from Bruce to Brenda as an example of obvious success. Money, referring to the twins' mother, Janet, noted that Brenda was much neater than Brian, loved dresses and dolls. Money's research immediately became popular, much was written about it, much was discussed. Radical feminists who had read Money's earlier work took notice. The hypothesis that gender is not innate was finally confirmed. Money's gender theory implied that there was no biological reason why men were better at math or engineering than women. In his view, nurture, not nature, determined whether a person felt like a woman or a man. Time magazine wrote about the scientist's success. The John/Joan experiment made it into pediatric, sexology, and psychiatry textbooks as proof that anatomical features do not determine fate, they are only a reason to raise a child in a certain, pre-designed way. Money's work stimulated the development of research on sex change. However, in 1980, Money stopped commenting on the John/Joan case and no longer said that the experiment had ended in unequivocal success. Brenda Reimer grew up a real tomboy. She loved to fight, climb trees, and preferred the street to playing with dolls. She had no friends, and Brian was embarrassed by his sister and did not invite her to play with his group. At school, the girl was teased mercilessly for her strange clothes, masculine gait and behavior. Brenda peed standing up in the toilet. She herself often told her parents that she felt like a boy. The Reimers kept silent, remembering Dr. Money's orders not to say anything about the operation. Gradually, the John/Joan secret tore the Reimers apart. The twins' father, Ron, became an alcoholic, and their mother attempted suicide. As a teenager, Brian began abusing substances and engaging in petty theft, and Brenda became increasingly insecure and withdrawn. In 1980, when the twins were 15, Ron took the children to an ice cream parlor and confessed everything. Suddenly it all made sense, Reimer recalled, and I realized who and what I was. David, the name that replaced Brenda, asked his family to treat him as a boy. He began taking hormones again, but this time to restore his body's male hormone levels. David not only took hormones, but also underwent several surgeries to rechange his sex. He removed his enlarged breasts and underwent a procedure to restore his male genitalia. Regular testosterone injections gave him masculine features. But the young man was still worried. He was afraid that he would never be able to get married and raise children. At the age of 20, he made 2 suicide attempts, neither of which was successful. Fortunately, David's fears were in vain. He married his girlfriend Jane Fontaine, and the couple adopted 3 children. Reimer began to lead the usual life of an exemplary family man, went fishing, and was involved in antiques and numismatics. At the age of 30, David agreed to work with another sexologist, Milton Diamond. The man wanted other doctors not to prescribe such traumatic treatment to children. Refuting John Money's theory, Diamond proved that gender cannot be instilled in a person. This hypothesis forced the medical community to treat sex reassignment surgeries on infants with both female and male primary sexual characteristics with greater caution. Debates about whether it is correct to carry out such manipulations at such an early age, which will definitely affect the life and health of the child, are still ongoing. Many activists and human rights organizations are sure that it is better to postpone such interventions until later, because their consequences are most often irreversible. After the publication of Diamond's article, David Reimer was remembered again. In 2000, a book dedicated to David's story went on sale, and a few months later he himself came to the Oprah Winfrey Show. In interviews, David often said, "Mom and Dad wanted the operation to work and for me to be happy. It's every parent's dream. But you can't be someone you're not. You have to be yourself." It seemed that David Reimer had come to terms with the consequences of his participation in Money's experiment. Meanwhile, his brother Brian had been treated for schizophrenia for a long time, and in 2002, he died of an overdose. David had a hard time dealing with the loss of his brother. He lost his job and spent almost all his time at home. He lived on the money left over from selling the copyright to his story. He often complained to his wife about his inferiority and did not understand what to do next. On the morning of May 5, 2004, David Reimer committed suicide. He was 38 years old. John Money's experiment on David Reimer remains a grim reminder of the limits of science and morality. It's a story that raises questions about the importance of ethics in scientific research, and how one man's tragedy can change the way we approach the fields of medicine and psychology. David Reimer didn't live to see the world recognize him as a victim, but his story lives on, warning against repeating the mistakes of the past.